Okay, I'm going to be continuing my previous video on the Taimanov with A6 on move 5. So E4, C5. Alright, anyways, and here my general conclusion is that knight takes C6 is the only way to try to play for an advantage. And there are multiple ways to play after knight takes C6. So you could play, Karyakin has been playing Queen D3, Queen G3. And there's also a way of playing similar to some type of Rossolimo Sicilian by playing e5. So I'm going to quickly cover my general conclusions on these lines, but only in just about a minute or two each. So for example, on Queen d3, which I don't really believe in, one interesting way to play for black is just to play d5. So d5, Queen g3, and now it's interesting to just play in a non-standard way. For example, with d4, and now you can even play h5. For example, h4 and c5. And I actually quite like black's position, although it is a little bit difficult to describe in general terms. But anyways, I don't think white should be looking in this general direction for an advantage. And let's look at e5. Carlsen also recently played it, and one of the basic ideas is that if you play d5, you can take on d6, and the queenside pawn structure will be a little bit damaged. So after queen c7, there are multiple moves. Bishop f4 is one move, queen e2 is another move, and f4 is another move. Although f4 is theoretically the most weakening move. So basically, let's say Queen e2 was recently played by Spidler. So after rook b8, g3. Now there's a simple novelty which I think just equalizes immediately, just with f6. And if bishop f4, then you can simply just take on b2. And then you have queen a5 coming. So here, if just e takes f6, knight takes f6, and at any moment, bishop f4 can be met by bishop d6. So it's not really any problem, because this bishop has access to this square. So if bishop g2, just d5, and I think black has an excellent position. And if I go back to bishop f4, as recently played by Carlsen, rook b8 was in his recent game, bishop d3, take, castle, and here Carlsen's opponent played knight e7. But in my opinion, there's a much stronger move simply with f5. And I'm not sure if Carlsen had something prepared here, but it doesn't look like white has anything clear, and so he might just be struggling to prove full compensation. So anyways, f4 was played by Kasparov. But then again, yeah, the dark squares are a little bit weak. And here, the queenside weakening by d5 and capturing en passant isn't such a big deal. So d5 is the best move here. And e takes d6, bishop takes d6, and now knight e4 is the main move. And there's a lot of theory on this line, so I won't really get into it. But bishop takes f4 is considered a poor variation. And okay, for one reason, you could just take and play knight d6 check and have a very firm grip on the position, or play simply take and play queen d3 and rook d1. Take and rook d1. But anyways, bishop to e7 is the main move. Bishop d3, knight f6, castle, castle, and queen e2 and queen f3 are the main moves. I'll just look at queen f3, just a sample line. But one of the basic problems with this variation is that it's not easy for white to actually really. First of all, he doesn't have any easy pawn breaks with this generic pawn structure. There aren't any easy pawn breaks. But at the same time, let's say the knight occupies the d5 square, the moment that you chase the knight away with c4, then d4 becomes a weak square. So let's look at a sample line. Let's say rook d8, b3, knight d5. And again, we have a very solid position for black. And the only hypothetical advantage white could have would be because of his superior pawn structure. But this is only theoretical. So let's say c4, and you have queen b6 check, knight b4, and now you can just play c5, bishop e3, c5. And on the next move, after you move the bishop, black just plays knight c6, and he can follow up with bishop b7 and put the knight on d4 if he so desires. So anyways, my general conclusion is that against all of these setups, black is able to counter the e5 push either by playing f6 or through tactics, or against f4 by simply playing d5, and white has weaknesses also. So anyways, I think that e5 is not the right way to go, and you have to play a little bit more conservatively, you could say. So bishop d3 is the main move, and now d5, castle, knight f6, and the main move is rook e1. And there are a couple of moves here. I'll just quickly mention that d4 is considered bad. One of the lines is knight a4, e5, and now c3. And white has to act very quickly, as otherwise black might actually have time to consolidate and play bishop e6 and c5, c4. So c5, and now the most aggressive and natural move is b4. And there are two lines. You can play b takes c3, or d takes c3, or c takes b4. And so if you take here, then you simply take here. And the lines are pretty straightforward. Here and bishop c4. And white is probably just winning here with the pressure on f7 and knight b6, and everything is working in his favor. And if bishop e6, then simply bishop e3, and the b6 square is extremely weak, and the a6 pawn is also weak. So c takes b4, and now c takes d4. And if queen takes, bishop e3, and now knight b6 again. Check, and white is already winning again. So every line appears to be quite bad for black. And if e takes d4, then the simplest might just be e5 and then bishop e4, and you can regain the d4 pawn with a clear advantage also. So anyways, I'll go back, and one other sideline is bishop b7. And in this line, white could continue to play in the same way that he plays in the main line, with some sort of e5 idea. But here you can also just play simply. You can play bishop f4, bishop e7, and because this pawn structure is very solid, as I've said before, one of the only ways that you can break it down is eventually playing c4. Or hypothetically, if there was an attack on the king side, although that seems a little bit unrealistic to me. But here you can just play in the center. Queen f3, rook a1, and now again probably knight d7, and then knight a4. And take, queen g3, and b2 is obviously taboo because all the time we have this move. Rook c8. Take, and now bishop e5. And in this position, white is able to consolidate a clear advantage. Bishop f8, you can play rook e3, you can play h4, h5, and black doesn't really have any clear counterplay at all, so white just has some sort of clear advantage. Yeah, and one reason why bishop f4